the only podcast that demystifies the fast-growing technology sector. I'm your host, Sofia Matveeva, Chicago Brief MBA and tech entrepreneur. My aim here is to give you the skills, knowledge, and confidence to find opportunities in the tech sector, whether that's through founding a company, getting a dream job, or bringing a fresh perspective to your work. For this episode, I spoke to David Segura. David Segura is one of the top angel investors in New York. He has invested in almost 50 startups to date, and his background is as a non-technical founder. So we met when we were both studying at the University of Chicago, and we were studying political science, so totally non-technical. And now we both ended up in tech. His first company was an advertising technology company, which he very successfully sold. And now the companies that he invests in and he advises mostly have technology at their core, and some of them are even biotech. So this is a really good conversation for people who are non-technical founders or who are investors who want to invest in tech companies and don't quite know how to evaluate them or what to look out for. He's got great advice on whether you need a co-founder, whether you need to code, and also his views on Andreessen Horowitz and Y Combinator I personally found quite enlightening. So enjoy this episode.
Yeah, on my side, I grew up in El Paso, Texas, which is like the small town out in West Texas. It was too small for me. I wanted to see the big city, so I went to school at the University of Chicago. Had an incredible experience, loved it, but it was way too cold. So yeah, exactly. That's where he met. Yeah. So I don't know how you feel about it, but like for me personally, I think Chicago is incredible. It's relatively cheap compared to London, compared to New York, but it was just too damn cold. So the first opportunity I had, took a job out in LA, worked in management consulting, disliked it. They disliked me, so it was mutual. And then I jumped into startups, and culturally it was a much better fit for me. So eventually, like you mentioned, I started a company called Giant Media. And what was really cool about Giant is that we were like a video exchange business based in Los Angeles. And our central insight was that, online video might be a big thing. This is like around 2009. And then on top of that, there was a new form of video where, for better or worse, brands were creating video that was not meant to be a commercial. It was essentially stop to finish, kind of a branded advertisement that was supposed to be entertaining. Honestly, some people did it better than others. We had clients like L'Oreal, American Express, did an okay job. And then we had clients like Dollar Shave Club and Capital One that would just blow it out, and Honda and all the automotive companies. So what we would do is we told them, we'll distribute your content, we'll figure out the most relevant audience, and we'll overperform. And one of our core insights, and it sounds like brilliant, but it was so obvious. I don't understand why other people didn't do it. We thought on the supply side of this marketplace, the publishers, that Facebook, games, and apps were incredible inventory sources. And then if we could basically give them an opportunity to like promote our videos, it'd be a cool secondary or even primary source of income. So that's what Giant Media became famous for. And also incredible luck, right place, right time, had an incredible team. We scaled it and eventually sold that company in 2014 to an ad tech that was backed by TPG, among others.
So it sounds like there was quite a big technical component to this. Mm-hmm. And so can you talk us through that? Like, yeah. What was the technology? How was all this content distributed?
Yeah, that's a great comment. I mean, at the end of the day, just for background, I was a political science and philosophy guy in college. I did not know anything about CS, was not technical in any sense of the word, but I appreciated technology. But I had enough humility to know that to build a platform like Giant Media did and scaled, we needed people that were strong and technical. So my co-founder, Matt Koskela, is a brilliant technologist. He was responsible for developing what we call the Video Stat platform, and we managed to scale tremendously. But the reason our partnership worked is that was your kind of typical American ADHD entrepreneur, talk really fast, get very excited. And he, on the other hand, was more sober, more technical, and he was responsible for helping me realize the vision on the product and technology side. So I think both sides need each other, but the reality is that most companies, at least in my opinion, whether it's in the United States or elsewhere, are typically founded by people like me, non-technical founders that are extremely pushy and hopefully sometimes inspirational. So,
Interesting. So let's talk about this CTO and the skills you needed to have to work with him? I mean, you had to learn some new stuff to at least be able to have a conversation. And I want to know, how much did you have to learn and how did you learn it?
Yeah, kind of learn about technology and how to interface with my CTO effectively. I kind of drew on past experiences at other startups that I worked at, including Twistbox Entertainment, a mobile content company that would distribute content and had partnerships with carriers in Europe like O2 or Telefonica in Spain. And even though my job was primarily business development, one of the things that I was responsible for sometimes was to essentially manage our response to RFPs for these major carriers. And so it was this thing, exactly, request for proposals. And sometimes they wanted someone to be the official video content partner for these different carriers. And it just involved a lot of different people in the company working together. And my role was essentially to package it all and make sure that everyone is interfacing properly. So part of that, as you can imagine, was working very closely with engineers and product managers. And the one takeaway I have from that experience is that they like things matter of fact. They don't want to be sold to. So when I talk to technical talent, whether it's at Giant Media or even now as an investor, I try to speak as quickly as possible and get to the point. They don't want anything sugar-coated, and at the same time, they're very capable people, but they need to know kind of what the goals are, the whys, and then they can figure out the best way to translate that towards a technical product.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of courses, did you have to take courses? Did you read books? Because the thing is, I've seen quite a few people who attempt to take coding courses, and then, it's completely not their personality. This is not really what they should be doing. But I've seen quite a few non-technical people, especially when they are entrepreneurial, they decide to learn things themselves. Did you go down that cul-de-sac?
Yeah. So I'll put it this way. I have a hot take on it. It's not the most popular view, but I think it's a complete waste of time. Like, in other words, I admire non-technical people who want to teach themselves new skills. But, for all intents and purposes, if you're trying to learn how to code and you're not already technical and you're already into your career, you might succeed and you might, get some sort of validation. But the reality is you'll only succeed in becoming like a mediocre software engineer. In other words, like, it's not really going to fundamentally help either your career or your organization, in my opinion. So the best thing a non-technical founder can do is double or triple down on their core strengths, whatever those are. I would hope a lot of that pertains to strategy and the vision, but the best thing that someone can do is just have enough technical competence to be fluent and able to talk to engineers, be able to recruit them, to get them to trust you. But it doesn't make sense to try to replicate their work, because realistically, if you are one of the better engineers or even the median at your company probably sucks. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
And how should people learn? Because now you're an investor and you have invested in over 40 companies, or was it 42 at last count? Or how
yeah, it's just under 50. It's right around 50 right now. Yeah, I just finished. Yeah, it's crazy.
Since you came to London last.
I've been very busy. Yeah, things have been crazy. And I know it's the top of the market and what have you, but there's a lot of companies that are positioned for growth. And, I'm investing in this current Y Combinator cohort. Just finished a syndicate for a company I'm really excited about called Equator Therapeutics. So I try to take all these insights and just be cognizant of what I know and what I don't know. Biotech, for example, is a good thing to talk about. My background. It's not only is it not technical, it's not at all science driven at all. I remember at University of Chicago having to take the core classes, some of those which were in science. I'm not a fan. So I'll just put it this way. The way I've engaged the team at Equator, which is not only technical but scientific, is that I've talked to them about their vision, their strategy for growth, tried to assess the size of the market. And I feel even without those abilities, I did a good job in evaluating and figuring out how to position them. Where I couldn't diligence it because it really was that technical, that scientific, I simply engaged a consultant friend who works at Church Labs, another that works for a publicly traded biotech company, and got comfortable. So there are solutions and hacks, I think, for being able to accomplish almost anything that you need to. And there's really no kind of category of investment, whether it's deep tech or otherwise, that I find too off-putting or too difficult to assess as a non-technical, founder and professional.
So do you invest in non-technical founders? Even in those?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is...
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'll put it this way. Like, I invest in people that I think are great, that are building great teams and are chasing a really big market opportunity. That's how I evaluate it. But if you wanted to break it down by numbers, like who is technical versus who is non-technical, it probably ends up skewing more towards non-technical. And that's not only unique to me, it's not unique to me. It's very common. Some of the biggest businesses in the world, whether it's Airbnb or otherwise, are typically founded by professionals who aren't technical. It's just a fact. In my own portfolio, just someone that just jumps, immediately to my head in evaluating this right now is a, team at Hawthorne. So Hawthorne is a really interesting company based in New York. Simplistically, you might call them a Dollar Shave Club, but based in New York, a bunch more stylish as a result. But their first product was based on a cologne where they're essentially helping Americans, especially men, customize a scent that works for them. And shockingly, I'll say that this is appalling to me because maybe I grew up differently. I mean, I grew up in El Paso. The culture is much more influenced by Mexico there. I was always told I should wear a cologne because it's kind of gross not to. But apparently most Americans do not wear cologne. So they're essentially messaging to that audience, and they're convincing them that, with a little bit of trial and error, we can find the right scent for you. So long story short,
public service, basically, for American men.
I think so. Yeah, when I first met them, I mean, they were insistent that this is a fact, and it is. But I just had a hard time even believing that, just wrapping my mind around that. And they're like, no, trust us, this is the fact. No. I was like, okay. Yeah, I guess it makes sense, I'll put it that way. I don't want to offer proof, but I believe it now. So long story short, what makes these guys special is that they have a background in both strategy consulting and design. And that's fundamentally what will work in this industry, this category. In other words, having the ability to create something that the consumer would actually want, could certainly benefit from a software engineer, but is probably more dependent on someone who understands the consumer marketplace and can effectively figure out the best way to acquire customers and message to them. And so I feel like a lot of businesses resemble that, whether it's a marketplace, whether it's a consumer app, even whether it's a fintech company. It really kind of fits nicely, I think, for non-technical professionals. And they're the ones that bring a lot of value to the table in most cases.
So where do you think this idea of the technical founder as the CEO guru, where did it come from? Because it is very, very prevalent. But I completely agree with what you say, because, being a great coder and also being a great commercial person, I've never seen it in real life.
Exactly. So I'll put it this way. There are some that do have unique talents where they're the full package, if you want to call it that. I've certainly know some people like that. But the reality is that most startups are founded by non-technical founders, and it's just been that way for many years. The one comment I will make, is my theory, and it's one that I think is seconded by a lot of people, is that there's some brilliant investors at Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z as they call it. And they kind of popularize this idea that you should only invest in technical founders because their core investment thesis is that it's easier to teach business to a technical founder than it is to teach technical and engineering to a non-technical founder. So fundamentally, why I think that statement is probably correct, I don't really think it has much bearing on the scalability or the outcome for the company. So while I respect it, I kind of see this as maybe a way for them to have more influence, even more control over a business. If they're the so-called business experts, it's much more likely that a technical founder, perhaps with less experience, with strategy or just general business acumen, is probably going to be more beholden to not just them, but other investors with that same mindset. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm not surprised that this has become very popular with a lot of venture capitalists. Respectfully, of course, it's self-serving and it gives them more control. So
that's
not surprising.
Good point. Wow, that's quite Machiavellian. Yeah. Who would have thought venture
you got to make it somehow, right?
No, that's really interesting. So, just final word of advice. What would you say to people who are non-technical professionals who want to transition into the tech space? Should they be learning to code? I guess you'll probably say no. Are there books that they should be reading? Or essentially, how do they transition into a space where engineers and engineering is very important, but that person that we're talking about, they have no intention of becoming an engineer, but they do need to work with them? What would you suggest that person does in order to get that job or start that company and get that investment?
I mean, fundamentally, the hardest thing about starting a business is, ideating what you should do and why, choosing a market, and thinking through strategy. If you really think about this, even before you start coding or experimenting or hacking, even if you were a technical founder, you still have to do that. And I think if you're a non-technical founder, the fact that you're not able to code this or engineer this yourself or solo is not problematic at all. So I encourage people to essentially think, jot down their idea, whatever the process is, whether they're using something new and trendy like Notion, which by the way is pretty cool. I just started using it. Or,
it's
paper.
Not cheap though.
Isn't it I guess I get it for free for some of my portfolio companies.
Wow.
So I don't know how much it costs, but whatever it costs, it's well worth it. Yeah.
It is. It's good.
I love it.
Yeah. No, I like it too.
So my biggest takeaway is plotting strategy and thinking through what you should do is easily the hardest, market research and so forth. So just get at that. And at the end of the day, most people within their network, I'm not talking about a best bud per se, but they have at least a professional acquaintance that is, somewhat akin to them that they can talk to about either potentially joining their venture or making recommendations on who they might work with. Mm-hmm. In my experience, there's two ways of doing that. You can basically find a co-founder that you're simpatico with, that you get along with, hopefully maybe have some personal history, and just off to the races. But if you really think about it, that's hard. It requires a lot of trust. I'm an optimistic, I like to think nice person, but I grew up on the border. It's different culture. We're not the most trusting people at all. And I'm not going to just share this thing that I think is valuable with just anybody. So what I'm trying to get at is that I think a lot of, non-technical founders should not feel that enormous pressure to I got to find a co-founder, which is almost like a marriage partner. Don't worry about that. Just find someone, perhaps even junior, that wants to work on something that's exciting, perhaps gives them more career and even equity upside, and don't worry about labels. They don't even necessarily have to be a co-founder. Maybe they are a co-founder, but you don't necessarily need your CTO on day one. So
that's a really interesting point, because I see a lot of people who I think they just saw this Silicon Valley myth of two co-founders, coding in a garage, and now they think they have to follow the same path, and then instead of working on the business bit, they are looking around for somebody and trying to convince that somebody to quit their job at Facebook where they're making a lot of money and work with them, which, rarely works.
Exactly. And, I'm not the only one that thinks that. There's actually some really great organizations that are kind of moving forward and realizing this.
Ooh.
In other words, London, Entrepreneur First exists.
Yeah.
You're obviously probably more familiar with them than I am, but I know some of their portfolio companies, including Donut, a really interesting company that is kind of dual headquartered in Los Angeles and also Berlin. And what they're doing is they're saying, oh yeah, that whole co-founder thing, it's hard. So just join, we'll help you and potentially be able to match you with someone. Antler VC as well. They have a lot of ties, as you know, to the Sam Weir brothers and the Rocket Internet family, or Mafia, if you want to call it that. And they're trying to do something very similar, with the added caveat that they don't force you necessarily to find a co-founder, but they do recognize that one of the value adds they can bring to the table is potentially matching you. And one of their favorite matches, not to put too many words in their mouth, but it seemed to be that they want to match non-technical talent, perhaps people with experience and so forth in business, with technical talent, which may or may not be as experienced. And I think that's a cool match. It's good philosophy.
But Y Combinator, which you're investing in a syndicate there, they are still sticking to the you must have a co-founder to apply situation.
I led a syndicate there actually. So I was very bullish and still very bullish on Y Combo. So I definitely don't want to speak against them. But what I will say about them is they have a more traditional outlook, meaning that you can't get in or admitted to Y Combo, which is already hard enough, unless, to your point, you have that co-founder. So they're looking for early stage, but they want teams. They want like brothers in arms and what have you. And I think that's cool, but it probably is a little limiting because then you miss out on a lot of great entrepreneurs that are maybe working a more steady job that they're ready to move on for, or perhaps someone who has already moved on but is not sure exactly how to get started. And I think that what's really going to happen is while Entrepreneur First and Antler will help fill that gap, I think that founders themselves need to get out there and just realize, I got to start ideating. I got to start doing my own research. I got to start evangelizing myself and my vision. And then people become attracted to that. I mean, that's ultimately how you build a company. You get people to believe in you. And some of those people are employees. Some of those people are co-founders. And then later on down the line, potentially investors.
Interesting. So that is human skill. That's convincing people. That's communication, and definitely not coding.
If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe, rate, and review. That would be a huge, huge help. And if you're interested in finding out what non-technical founders need to know about tech to start their companies, then go to techfornontecchies.co and have a look at the Tech for Non-Technical Founders course. And on that note, thanks for listening and have a lovely day.